All right, so the Sanskrit terms of the Upanishads. Well, probably the first one to start with would be this term samsara. Samsara. What is samsara? Samsara is the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Now, you've probably heard something about this before. You've probably heard this in the sense of saying, oh yeah, that's right, the Hindus, they're the ones who believe in reincarnation and that you go from being a person to a bug to a cat to another person to another bug to a cow to something else to a god to a bug again. Bad luck, right? Well, I suppose in a very general and colloquial sense that there's something to that. But philosophically, it doesn't work. And really, that way of thinking about reincarnation is, interestingly enough, it probably has more in common with the Greek ideas about reincarnation than it does with the actual philosophy within Brahmanical thought, and certainly within the commentary on the Vedas, what's called Vedanta, the philosophy of the Upanishads. Here's why. There is a sense in which everything that exists to exist within the tradition exists by virtue of the fact that it is a composite. You being who you are right now, as you are right now, as it is a composite. There's the matter, there is the molecules, the atoms that are just the way you are right now. And these are always in a state of changing and shifting and moving in you, right? You are literally perpetually perishing simply by virtue of being. This is what it is for you to be. This is what it is for anything to be. Whether it's a physical object or a concept or an event, it is what it is in that moment because it's composed just in that way, fits together just that way. It is just that expression at that time, at that place, in that way. And in order to be that, it's always in a state of perishing, of perpetually perishing. You know, there's a way in which I like to think about this. I remember about, oh gosh, it's got to be almost 20 years ago now, maybe even a little bit more. But it was when Johnny Carson was hosting the Tonight Show, and he had on a statistician who had written a book on fun with statistics. Paradox of all paradoxes, right there, right? But he on the show, he asked this statistician to talk about different interesting things that you can do with statistics. And one of the things that stood out in my mind, I still remember, is that he talked about the way that just by virtue of the laws of dispersion in the air, that there's some relatively high probability, like a 30 or 40% chance, that with every breath you take, you are inhaling one air molecule that was exhaled by Julius Caesar with his last breath in 44 BC on March 15th. Now think about that for a second, how extraordinary that is, because it's not as though that air molecule that you breathed in had just sat around waiting for you to breathe it in, 2,000 years later, then said, woohoo, now I got to stay around for another 2,000 years, right? It's been part of something else, and 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 intricately so, right? Essentially so, necessarily so. And in other words, what that means is what is part of you, essentially part of you, was part of something else, and something else, and something else, and something else, and something else, right? This cycle of everything in being what it is always decomposing and recomposing and decomposing and recomposing. And then that's the principle of how something is what it is. I want to emphasize that. That's the way in which it comes to be. That is being. That is existing. Is this composition and decomposition and recomposition, decomposition. That principle. That's samsara. So that's the first term, samsara. And you can see from that this cycle of existence is wrapped up in everything that you do. It's everything in anywhere, whether it's back then, now, in the future, near, far away, conceptual, physical, whatever. Everything, insofar as what it is subject to samsara insofar as it is a particular thing. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second term I want to bring up, term you've probably heard before, karma. Now, karma is it's a word that I think gets maligned and misused philosophically more than most others within this tradition. And here's why. The word karma it's again a Sanskrit word. It's derived from the Sanskrit word kur, which means to do, the verb kur, to do. It's from a very diverse conjugation when in Sanskrit, the second conjugation. You can do a lot of fancy stuff with it, and the Brahmanical thinkers and pundits, the people who like to play with the words, do a great deal with this stuff. Now, the word karma, insofar as it's from kar, to do, simply basically means action. But and insofar as it's action, it's what drives the circle of samsara around again and again and again. But there's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind about this. First of all, there is a mistake that people often make of thinking about karma as being good or bad. Now, this is a mistake because karma is no more good or bad than gravity is good or bad. If a rock falls on you while you're hiking and you break your ankle and you go, oh man, that really hurts, what a bummer, you don't curse the gravity that brought the rock down, I presume, right? It's just simply a natural event. It might be infortuitous, but it is nature being nature being nature. Well, to some extent, karma is the same sort of way. You don't curse action for acting, right? You just simply allow it to take it as it is for what it is, and leave it at that. So there's that. The second thing to say about karma, many times you'll hear people talk about your karma. Not only that your karma is good or bad, but that it is yours, that it's something you possess. Well, again, except in a very, very colloquial sense of the word, that's inaccurate. Because really, far from you having karma, it's more that karma's got you. I mean, think about it for a second. How is it that you come to think or feel or speak or do any of the things you do, or be in the place you are, be sitting here having the thoughts that you're thinking, watching this YouTube video, right? How is it that you do that? You do it because all sorts of events, actions, happenings, doings, karma, brought you right here, right now, to be able to hear this in this language, in this place, with this technology, so that you can conceptualize it exactly as you do, with your neurons firing and absorbing this exactly as it does. Now that's karma. That is karma. But that's karma shaping you, not you shaping karma, right? So that when you talk about something that your karma, yeah, it's karma expressing through you, but it's not yours, right? It's not something that exactly that you possess, except with, in a very specific, either very colloquial sense, or when I get to Atman, there'll be a certain way, I suppose you could say, that you possess karma in that respect too. But we'll put a hold on that. So there's that. Another thing I would say about karma to realize is that there's no beginning or end to it. Karma is, except in one very peculiar sense, a sense of coming to realize what the nature of karma is. There's no overcoming karma, and there's no place that karma begins. One thing that's very interesting about this tradition is that while there are eras, cosmic eras, the term for it in Sanskrit is called kalpas, there's no sense of God, of an absolute beginning or an absolute ending to the world. The world's beginning and ending are infinite, and indeed it's the realization of that that's part of the process of liberation from suffering. So there's this. And then one last thing I would say too. Karma is something that it permeates through everything else. I mean, think about this. Then go back to the Julius Caesar air molecule again, right? If the trajectory, if the karma of this air molecule made a difference to all these different things and all these different people and all these different places at all these different times, and it affected them, then their effect is having an effect on you, and your effects are going to have effects on everything else. Everything, by virtue of karma, everything is interdependent with everything else. Every action you do, every action you think with every part of you affects everything else. And everything else, the crying of a child in Haiti in 1723, the flight of a butterfly in the Amazon with the chaos theory that you might have heard of before, all of these things, absolutely they make a difference. They couldn't help but make a difference because they are what make the karmic activity of you as you are, in the consciousness that you express, exactly what you are right here, right now. Everything is interdependent with everything else. Everything affects everything else, and it could be no other way by virtue of the fact that things are as they are. It's necessary for them insofar as we would speak of them at all. Okay, a little bit more in a second.